Ringo Starr said, folks, you always get by in this life with a little help from your friends. And I am blessed to have such a good friend here in Bob Lazzari, my longtime friend, host of Monday Night Sports Talk. I'm so pleased to host it with him in Windham, Connecticut. And I do not know what became of Kathy Garver, and this would be the second time I've promised her to you. And the second time she was not there, but I'm pleased to have Bob, and with Bob we can always talk sports and anything in society that Bob wants to talk about. And Bob, how you doing?
Oh, Tony, you said the second time around, I immediately thought of Sinatra. We always could talk Sinatra, too. You know that, my friend.
Yeah, for certain. You know, we were playing Sinatra Christmas music earlier, and I just love his Christmas music.
Tony, you and I had talked about Sinatra at length in the past, and there's really nothing that he undertook that he didn't succeed at. Possibly the greatest entertainer I've ever come across. You and I are privy to his acting ability, the way he sang songs, the way he just kind of directed people in his life. And he had a little help from his friends too, right, Tony?
Yeah, and some of his friends got him the very best people to play behind him.
Well, of course, you knew my dad, Tony. He was a music historian, and he used to tell me incredible stories about Sinatra and the power that he did have. And he was always amazed, not only at his talent, but as you just said, the way he could get people the best of the best to do. Sinatra didn't do anything halfway, Tony. Let's just put it that way. And I still listen to him constantly, and still am amazed, and don't know if I'll ever see that kind of entertainer in my life.
You know, and people will say, "Oh, Harry Connick," or it's like it's a fake Rolex to me compared to the original.
Great point, Tony. And you've pointed out to me in the past, and you saw him act more than I did. Of course, you're more of a movie buff, but Sinatra went into even like TV series and things like that, and excelled tremendously at acting. And I think that was kind of underrated. Did win an Academy Award, am I correct?
Well, and that was a part in his life. You know, he had gone through the band singing, and he went to the small group singing. His films after MGM were not really well received. The American public was getting tired of him, as they often do with people, and there's always somebody newer or fresher or better looking coming along. And he had some very rough years, from what I understand. I believe he had a vocal hemorrhage and a lot of trouble. You know, the marriage, Ava Gardner, the drinking, the getting in trouble. And then one day, I understand, he gets this book or script from Here to Eternity. He starts reading it, and he kept screaming, "I am Maggio. I am Maggio. I must play Maggio." Now, everybody thought he was crazy. It's like, you know, what are you talking about? You know, you're Frank Sinatra. You're the voice. You're not gonna put that. That's a subhuman role. And he says, "No, I am Maggio." And you watch that movie, and he was just magnificent. I mean,
he's just a naturally born, incredible entertainer, and we could go on and on about him. But again, you said he did Christmas music, and he wrote music about his Ava Gardner breakups, and
yes.
And we've talked about, you know, guys that are past their prime, you know, a la your Tony Bennett's of the world, Tony, that should have gave it up a long time ago. And Sinatra did hit that point, but Sinatra, even at the age, in his 70s, when I would see him, he'd still dress to the T's, and people would be just totally mesmerized by the guy in concert. You know, there was booze and whiskey on his voice, but there was something he had that I probably don't think any singer ever had. He had them still in the palm of his hand, like nobody I've ever seen, with no voice at all. He was just Sinatra. That's about all I know. The only way I could really explain it.
And I think that's a very apt explanation, Bob. You know, as far as his talents, like I tell people all the time, you can say, he was a mob guy, he was a bully, he was this. He wouldn't have been as good as he was if the mob didn't pay for Gordon Jenkins and the mob didn't pay for Nelson Riddle. And you know, I suppose you can make that argument, but you stick him in an MGM musical, and he's going note for note with Crosby. He's going step for step with Gene Kelly. I mean, you know, not that many people can do that.
No, it's as we say in the Munsters episodes, Tony. When Sinatra was up to being Sinatra,
Yeah.
There was nothing quite like it. And you know, we just celebrated his what was it, the 100th anniversary, Tony, of his birth. And,
Yeah, that's right.
quite the celebration, and in various ways throughout the country. You know, we've heard music, we saw videos, we heard remembrances, and a lot of his cronies, of course, are not around anymore, Tony. And that's the generation of your Dean Martins, your Sinatras, and boy, guys of that era that were just one of a kind. And he again, I hope he just never gets lost to history. You know, I don't know if this generation will totally embrace, you know, the movies and Sinatra, the music, the man, the myth. But you got to read the books. It'll always be there. And again, one of the most fascinating people you'll ever come across. And there's like guys like that in the sports world. Sinatra had that in the entertainment world.
Well, you know, and you stop and think of his historical significance. He was one of the first singers, if not the first singer, to actually come out singing with strings and horns. That was not a common thing. You know, you were a band singer, and he was coming out with strings on one side and horns on the other. He was also a man of great political significance, whether you agreed with him or whether you didn't. He was friends with Jack Kennedy, actually helped Jack Kennedy get elected during 1960. That whole story about Joe Kennedy going to Sam Giancana and saying, you know, you got to get everybody along the way to vote for my son. And Frank had arranged that meeting. And I mean, a president of the United States is elected because of that. You can doubt the morality of it. But then when Jack gets into office, he's told by his brother, the Attorney General, you got to stay away from this guy. He's, you know, tied in with the mob. And Frank took that very personally, you know, because Frank was, as far as he was concerned, I'm sure he was right. He's the guy that got him there. You know, so it's, I mean, the historical significance of the man is just amazing.
Yeah, off the stage, he was, that's what made the greatness of the man transcended every kind of boundary there was. And for a guy that had sung Old Man River like he did, and then in the same breath to be able to sing, you know, One More for the Road, and you know, the Ava Gardner odes to Ava Gardner, I'm a Fool to Want You, my father said, was one of the most haunting, most incredibly done songs he's ever heard in his life. It's just, I mean, we could do 10 shows about Sinatra. He had that kind of life, Tony, and it spanned so long when you think about it. Early 40s to what? Right up to the 80s.
It might have even gone into the 1930s because he was doing a lot of road singing before he caught on with Dorsey.
The Pied Pipers, was that?
Yeah.
Was that back in those days, Tony?
Yeah, that was after his road singing. From what I understand, now, of course, you mentioned Tommy Dorsey to our mutual and esteemed friend Michael Dante. Best guy in the world, nicest guy, treated me well. Frank Sinatra, I think, in the books has a different tale to tell, where Tommy Dorsey had signed him to a lifetime contract, which he had some difficulty. You know, Tommy Dorsey just saw this incredible power that this man had, and that I guess was worked out over time. But he then became a singer for Dorsey, and then he went to MGM and did those musicals with Gene Kelly.
And you mentioned the power that he had as far as in the business, Tony, to have at the top of the hat to say, you know, I want to work with Nelson Riddle,
yes,
Billy May, and Axel Stornell, and Harry James, and then he went on to the Count Basies and the Duke Ellington. There is really nothing that he couldn't do the history and some of the arrangers he worked with. Even went into the Jobim type of genre. The guy there was no end to what he couldn't do and how he could perform. And like you said, it wasn't just singing. We saw him dance and do some incredible things. And then I think he was a detective in a TV show. Tony said it was incredible.
Or a movie, yeah. And he acted well. I mean, he didn't act well in some of the lesser things he did, or he acted well when the production wasn't good. But when given the opportunity, he was, he was a formidable actor.
Well, we've seen a lot. Tony, he kind of acts when he sings. He's that dramatic with the Rod McEwen type of things, which you and I love.
Yeah.
Again, he just reinvented himself so many different ways, even while he was in his prime, which is pretty hard to do. But that's the legend they call Sinatra, and I'm just glad to have lived in an era to have at least been privy to his greatness by other people.
Well, and it's interesting. He had and we were talking about this earlier when we were showing Christmas clips of how Bing Crosby really liked and respected David Bowie. Frank Sinatra really liked and respected George Harrison, and he would always do something in his later concerts and credit George, saying, "This is the most beautiful song ever written." Now, you think of everything this man ever sung. And he just humbly put himself before George and said, "You wrote the best song, and I'm going to do my best to sing it," which I always thought was very nice.
Again, the uniqueness of his entire life. And of course, to do it with his daughter, Tony, something stupid.
Yeah.
One of the most, it just makes you cry when you hear it sometimes. And, his kids, I always felt sorry for his kids, Tony, because as being the son or daughter of Frank Sinatra, where you're going from there, right?
Yeah, I know. You're born with the Yankee championship ring.
Pretty much, and you're pretty, they did okay, I guess, but Dad was Dad, and I guess it's not quite like being one of the Gotti boys, but you get that same kind of feeling.
Well, and all of those other Italian male singers, all fine performers, Al Martino, Vic Damone, Sergio Franchi, but for Frank, none of them would have had a job.
That's a good point, Tony. That kind of genre was very popular at the time. Your Jimmy Roselli's.
Jimmy Roselli.
Frank had guys on his staff that kept their success to maybe at a checked level, let's say.
Yeah.
But all those guys were just terrific, and my goodness, I learned so much about all of them just because of the Sinatra types things that they did. And, it was just a great era, and just those names you just mentioned were terrific performers. And
I understand Frank's mother would often call these guys up, and Frank's mother was a tough type from Hoboken, and said, "Look, you guys would be nowhere, but for my son. Give me a few thousand. I want to go to Vegas and gamble." And they would just pay it to her because they wanted to work and they wanted Frank to like them. And honestly, they understood that to be true.
Yeah. Throughout our talk, I think one thing we'll agree on: if you were a friend or any kind of associate of Frank Sinatra, you always wanted to stay at least on his decent side.
Oh, for certain.
That he had that kind of power, and my goodness, from Hoboken, New Jersey, to probably the greatest entertainer that you and I will ever see. It's pretty impressive, and we've come across some really great entertainers in our time. But again, when I start listening to them, when I start watching them, the videos and the tributes, I can't stop. I'm saying, my goodness, people will never know how big this guy really was. And wow, it was in my house when I grew up, and I feel very lucky, and I'm glad we got to talk to him tonight.
Well, and we promised the sports discussion, and we're really doing a great job with that. But I'll try to do a little sports here. He was a huge baseball fan.
Yeah, you told about Cary Grant, your Sinatras. These guys were a lot of them on the West Coast, right, Tony? Either at Anaheim or L.A.
They would, follow the Dodgers and sit in the luxury and go visit Lasorda and have a good time. That was baseball meant a lot to him.
You and I had the chance to talk to funny.
Yeah.
He had mentioned his relationship with Sinatra, and I guess Frank never had problems getting seats at Dodger Stadium.
And Tommy had very high
that
praise
was
for him.
enjoyable. Just hearing it from a guy that was a legitimate friend of Frank Sinatra and a legend in his own right, Lasorda. That was some kind of conversation.
It's really something, and you know, it's during Christmas I often think of Dean Martin because Dean had some great Christmas music, and Dean was Dean. You know, in many ways Dean could not be Frank, but you know, if I couldn't listen to Frank, I'd listen to Dean, and I still do.
Oh boy, my father had that same kind of attitude. You know, he says there's time for Sinatra, but then you know you put Dean on as smooth as they come. And another guy, Tony, that could do a little dancing, a little acting, and of course the Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts were the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. You know, I'll play them back right now. And you had a panel of about 10 of the funniest people in the world up there, just having a good time. Nothing quite like it. And of course they roasted Sinatra once, and my goodness, it was just funny. You know, of all the stories, and Dean Martin, of course, as you know, kind of miscast over the years as some kind of drunken guy that maybe hung on to coattails, but no, a tremendous singer, great entertainer in his own right, and had his share of tragedy too.
He sure did, and the thing is, you know, he never was really quite the same after that, so sadly.
Oh, no question about it, and but you couldn't help but love the guy, you know, just that he had that kind of personality.
And the amazing thing is when you watch him and when you watch him sing today, I've never seen somebody sing or perform and just have such a good time doing it.
Yeah,
you can see he was enjoying every minute of it.
Almost like he just catch somebody in mid-song, whether it be a Sammy Davis type, and always, and he made it look easy, Tony. I think that was a Dean Martin trait. He made it look easy, but smooth. Oh my goodness, some of the albums are just the
amazing.
Voice was there. You always thought, you know, a guy that drank and smoked and couldn't sound that good, but another guy that could sing Christmas albums and make them sound good. It's just again, we're privy to two guys like that, and there's many more, but there weren't many bigger names than Dean Martin and Sinatra back when we were little types.
No, and you know, and we saw Seaver, and we saw Mantle, and we saw Chamberlain, and we saw Alcindor, and we saw Bobby Orr, and we saw Bob Gibson. And if I recited every name, we'd be here till 11 o'clock at night, but I'm not going to do that, other than to say, Bob, thanks so much. I'm grateful for your willingness to come on in such a short period of time, and I know we're on tomorrow. The both of us are on tomorrow out of Alameda, California, at 2 p.m. on Zig Tyco's Comfortably Zone Radio. And this is a huge webcast. It goes all over the Bay Area, and Bob and I are just going to talk the way we are now about all kinds of things, and no telling where this discussion goes. No telling if it's going to be politically correct or not, but we'll have a good time doing it. So.
No, we will, Tony. That'll be a lot of fun. I look forward to it. And my goodness, we just scratched the surface. But anytime we'll talk again, and I appreciate you having me on.
Bob, it's an honor. Take care. Thank you. Thank you for being my friend.
Tony,
Merry Christmas. And that was Bob Lazzari, and very grateful that he could come on in such short notice. But we're going to be coming to you right back to wind out, give you the holiday blessing. Thanks for being with us. And what a night we've had. What a day. Thanks for being with us.
It's not the pale moon